Hi, this is Russ Krajak, and I'm going to talk about IP triage, managing IP assets in unstable times. A little bit of housekeeping. First off, I'm happy to take your questions. Please use the chat function to submit them. I'm probably going to get through all the material first and then answer questions at the end. So, what we're going to learn today are two questions to manage your patents. These are two tools that could be used at any stage of the IP process, whether we're trying to figure out whether or not we want to get a patent on some invention, whether we're doing due diligence as an angel investor on whether we want to invest in this company, whether we're thinking about taking a license from a university or somebody else, and think about how we value the IP in terms of, how much more money do we want to invest in it? The context of this is about managing the IP portfolio and seeing if we have assets that we should get rid of and which assets should we keep. Hopefully you'll get a better perspective on patents in general, and you'll get to see how an investor in IP thinks about patents. I think the patent system is broken, but not the way you think it is. It's not about patent trolls. It's not about weird patents coming out of the patent office. Those things aren't really where the patent system's broken. The system is broken in the emotion that decisions are used to make about IP, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail later. But it's also broken in the attorney-client relationship. And it's really just summed up in the phrase of, don't ask the barber if you need a haircut. And it probably took me 10 to 15 years in the business, in the trenches, to really grasp what that's all about. When I go to the barber, I sit in the chair and I say, look, if I don't look good, it's all your fault. And the barber just laughs at me and says, how you look is your problem. All I'm going to do is give you a haircut. And that same reaction, that same interaction happens when the entrepreneur, the inventor, goes to a patent attorney and says, I want an asset that I can raise money against. I want a business tool that I can negotiate agreements with. I want something that I can license out. I want something that's adding value to my company. And the patent attorney says, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not my area of expertise. I'm going to get you a patent. It's up to you to take the responsibility to see if that patent's any good. And a lot of startup companies, they're making their way as best they can through the system, but they wind up abdicating a lot of their intellectual property to the patent attorney. And essentially they're letting the fox guard the hen house. I'm a recovering patent attorney, and I knew that there was something weird when I got into the business, but it took me probably 10 to 15 years to really grasp the nuance and the importance of what's going on with don't ask the barber if you need a haircut. And I've seen a lot of really, heartbreakingly bad decisions made because of that. What I'm trying to do with Blue Iron is realign our interests. I do a financing model. I finance the patents as a startup is building out their portfolio. And we do loans against patents using patents as collateral. And it's really about putting skin in the game. Yes, the finances help a startup with cash flow. You pay for the patent after the patent issues, not before. It's not, the costs aren't front loaded and so forth. So from a cash flow and capital utilization standpoint, the financing works really well. But the real reason to do it is that I can only finance patents that I think are going to have value. So I can walk away from patents that might not have value, or I can drive the patents in a certain direction so that they will have value. The clients that understand this, it makes all the difference to them. So a couple of weeks ago, I started looking at the abandonment rates for patents. And I really wanted to know if I could detect whether people were abandoning patents because of this COVID-19 virus thing. And in fact, what I found was the data for March, which is right here. In March, we saw a historically high abandonment rate. It shot up from a norm of 12 to 13, 14%. It shot up to 20 for small entities. These are less than 500 people. The abandonment rate it comes from the patent prosecution. So patent prosecution means we send a patent to the patent office, a patent application. The examiner rejects it. We do a response, and then maybe we amend it, or we argue with the examiner saying, your rejection was improper for this reason or whatever. And the typical cadence is to go back and forth, typically 4 to 5 times, back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes the patents get issued quicker, sometimes they take longer, and they do take time. At some point, the examiner says, okay, you've convinced me that this patent is allowable, or you've amended the claims so that they're a little bit narrow and I can allow this. So, it'll end that direction, or it'll end in the direction of the applicant, the patent, the inventor says, I give up. I don't want to put any more money into this. I'm sick of arguing. I don't have, it's typically a financial, or it's a legal, technical issue of maybe the prior art is too strong in here. I'm having to amend too narrow. But anyway, the normal rate is 12% for small entities. And when I saw this blip in March, I went back to 2008 and I went through and took all the data for 2008. And, during the recession and the uncertainty and the huge fall of the stock price, the abandonment rate was flat, essentially. The only explanation I have for March is that people's psychology really changed in February and March with this COVID-19 virus. All of a sudden we have shutdown order, shelter in place orders. We have to stay home. We're worried about the grocery stores not having any food, worry about shaking hands with somebody and coming down with a very, very painful virus, worried about our families getting sick, worried about ourselves getting sick. All of a sudden our priorities changed. And instead of investing in a patent, which is inherently a 20-year asset, people quit. People just said, there's things that are more important in life. The data that you see in April, the data that I have right now is about a 33% abandon rate. That will go down. It will go down. Okay. The data that we have here is incomplete because the director of the patent office got authority to make some changes. And the change that they made was to extend any date that was due in April was extended 30 days. So the abandonment rate in April will go down because there's an extra time to respond. So now we have an extra month. And we won't really know until May whether that change, flattened the curve or reversed it completely. There's a chance that the abandonment rate would go way back to historical norms. Patent decisions are often based on emotion rather than rational thinking. And we as humans, whether we want to believe this or not, tend to make emotional decisions first, our quote gut reaction, and then we justify those with so-called rational thinking. The fact that there's this emotion around patents needs to be taken into consideration anytime you're making a decision about patents, because that emotional portion will cloud judgment. It will take some of the factors and highlight some and make you want to ignore others. For an angel investor or for an entrepreneur, patents are kind of a safety net. Mentally they're a safety net in the sense that, well, if things really go bad, or if we have competitors come around, at least I have some patents. And you see this a lot with angel investor. You see it on Shark Tank. The person on Shark Tank is pitching their idea, and the sharks will ask, do you have a patent? And they say, yes. End of discussion. Nobody ever says, well, is that patent good? Was that patent a rational thing to do? They just say, oh, you have a patent, end of discussion. We just assume that everything's wonderful because of that. But it's not. It doesn't mean the patent's any good, doesn't mean the patent's well written, doesn't mean anything, but they mentally check the box and move on. And I see this a lot as I'm dealing with companies that have been around for a few years and are now trying to take loans against their patents. And they will tell me that their patents are super valuable and super important and whatever. And I look at them and they fail a couple of the problems, fail the questions that we're going to talk about today. And I can't help you. These patents really aren't that good. And I hear them tell me, nobody has ever said that before. All these really smart people have looked at these patents and said, wow, these are wonderful. They have all kinds of great stuff in them. And wow, this really must be valuable. But when it comes to borrowing against them and have a patent attorney look at them from that standpoint, you're telling me they're not very good? It's often, a rude awakening for them. And part of that comes from the emotional part of they don't want to look at that safety net to know. They do worry that it's not as valuable as they thought it was, but it would erode everything that they've been working on if that safety net wasn't there. And so from an emotional standpoint, a lot of entrepreneurs just don't want to know. They don't want to know if their patents are any good. The other part of it is that there's a real desire for inventors to get patents. They are monumental and very prestigious awards that people get. These are the things that are talked about at your funeral. Well, he or she had 3 patents. These are big, life-changing, monumental achievements. And for inventors, for an engineer, it's, other than the Nobel Prize, getting a patent is about as good as most people are going to get. The issues that occur with this, though, is that the inventor can be so dead set that they're going to get a patent and and they need to get a patent for so many other reasons that all rationality is lost. I had an inventor whose dad told him that he'd never amount to anything and kicked him out of the house at 16. And this inventor was one of the most prolific people on the face of the planet. He had tens and, I don't know, 50 patents maybe. And it was all about proving his dad wrong. His life mission was about proving his dad wrong. And patents were a way to do that. And when you're facing that kind of emotional headwind, making decisions around these assets is really, really difficult. I had an angel investor probably a year ago tell me that he didn't think that patents were really that big a deal. As opposed to getting some big, huge award, he said it was really more like getting a date to the high school dance. When you get a date to the junior high dance, it feels like it's a monumental achievement, but really all you've done is convinced one person that you are barely likable enough. It really doesn't mean all that much. The real fact of the matter is what the angel investor was saying is statistically true. About 95% of all patents are worthless. And I'm not just making up that number. That comes from a couple studies on patent valuation. But even the patent office says that only 2% of all the patents out there actually make money. And when you hear venture capital investors say, I don't believe in patents, I don't think startups should have patents, this is why. The why is that they have a 20-to-1 odds that these patents are going to be worthless. So, and it's probably even worse for startups than 20-to-1. But even so, 20-to-1 odds of the fact that I do all this due diligence on these IP assets and they're going to be worthless. So why should I even bother? It's the real reasons why patents are worthless is that one little sliver, that 5%. Those are the ones that are enforceable and capture real business value. And we're going to talk about two tools that correspond to enforceable and real business value. How do I figure that out in, well, I don't want to use the word layman's terms, but how do I figure that out in a simple way and make sure I'm on the right track? That's what we're going to go through this afternoon in this webinar. These really good patents, that 5%, that sliver, are really great for doing deals for a startup company. If a startup company has a good IP portfolio, they can do a deal with a strategic partner in a way that they couldn't otherwise. Think about a medical device company, a startup company. They have a brand new product. It works. It's doing its thing, but they want to do a strategic relationship with a big company. And the big company has distribution and a brand name and a sales force and so on. And they can do a deal with a strategic because they have patents. Let's say they didn't have a patent. Well, the strategic has better engineering. They have better manufacturing and supply chain. They have better distribution. They have better branding, better packaging, better sales force, better terms, better economics in terms of, being able to get to the market properly. why would the strategic do a deal with a little startup? Why wouldn't they just copy it flat out and put it as part of their own product? The only thing stopping them is that the startup has patents, and that the startup has the ability to tax them or stop them from doing it. And so that's really where patents come into play for a startup. The other way is kind of outbound licensing. As a startup is building product, as they're working through engineering issues, as they're figuring out the things that need to be fixed and built on the way to their vision, sometimes those can be packaged up and used in different marketplaces. And they can be used in ways that you didn't even think about. I'm working with a company that does a lot of online dating applications. And they're talking about, it's a software play that deals with human interaction. Well, where else do humans interact? They interact at work, they interact with their families, they interact in sports sessions, leagues, and so on. That technology that was developed in the dating app area could be repackaged and used in these other situations that that the startup might not want to go into, or might not want to build a beachhead in all these different places. So they may be able to package that up, put a patent around it, and spin it out or sell it off or license it to somebody else. For startup companies, the idea of doing enforcement or litigation, tuning up going to federal court and tuning up a competitor with a lawsuit is probably a last resort. Very few startup companies bother to get patent enforcement insurance, which is amazingly affordable. And it gives them kind of this war chest to go after a competitor, but very few of them actually get that. And because patent litigation is so expensive, it's usually not the way patents are actually used by a startup. Big companies play this game much, much differently than startups. Big companies use patents as trading cards, as poker chips. The things that big companies do, well, the thing that the big companies can rely upon is the stats. 5% of the patents are going to be really valuable, right? 2%, 5%, 2%, whatever. But these large companies can afford to file 1,000 patents a year. Of that 1,000, maybe 50, 10, 50, 100 of them are going to be super valuable. And for them, it's just cost of doing business. And they're playing the odds. A lot of these companies, IBM, Samsung, Microsoft, Intel, Google, Qualcomm, HP, like Dell, all these guys all have tens of thousands of patents in their portfolio. And so just playing the odds, they have good assets. The startup company doesn't have that luxury. For a startup company, we have to make sure that every single patent really has value. If it doesn't add value, it's a significant cost. If it doesn't add value, the $30, $40, $50, $60,000 that patent cost could be better spent doing marketing, building inventory, going to another trade show, whatever. That capital is really precious and needs to be put to use. I do want to point out that this picture shows Phil Gordon, who won several bracelets at the World Series of Poker. He was the very first client of Blue Iron, of my patent finance company. The first patent I ever financed was for Phil Gordon's startup. And I want to thank him for kind of getting me started. So having said all that, I want to get into two questions to use that we can use to manage the portfolio well. Is the invention detectable, and can someone design around it? This idea of detectability kind of captures the idea of whether a patent is enforceable. If I cannot tell that somebody else is using my invention, my patent's pointless. It's unenforceable. If somebody can design around my patent has no business value because it's not an effective impediment. I look at patents a lot, and I often ask the entrepreneur or the inventor, can you tell if someone infringes? And sometimes they just say, oh yeah, absolutely. I know if somebody's going to infringe. But I've already looked at the claims and I know that the claims are completely undetectable. And it really highlights the fact that what the inventor sees, or sometimes what the angel investor sees, or the CEO or the entrepreneur, what they see is different than what I see. From a detectability standpoint, I look at the claims. They look at the specification. The truth is, if any element in the claim is undetectable, the patent is worthless. So what I have here is a picture of a patent with all the pages just kind of laid out. And it's a patent that Tropicana got on one of the biggest inventions in orange juice, which was the not for concentrate orange juice. This one's about 20 years old. It was issued in 2000. But what you can see from this is that there's all kinds of data. There's this description that goes on and on and on and on. And Tropicana took data over 2 complete growing seasons. So there's information from all these different oranges and different varieties and how the sugar value goes up, and the color number changes and so on at different stages during the growth period. But it explained in intricate detail how they plan to roll out not for concentrate orange juice. It showed how they're going to do all their blending, how they were going to store the orange juice, how they were going to make sure that they had enough orange juice to get through certain parts of the season where some oranges weren't in season and others were. And it really detailed all the research and development that Tropicana had on this brand new invention. This is the part that they give away, okay? The description of the invention, the text part, the figures, the long narrative, that is what we give away to our competitors. What we get back is the claims. The claims are the part that we enforce against our competitor. The claims are a little bitty part in the back. They're sometimes hard to read and hard to decipher, and they're kind of this big, long, clunky sentence, and they're written kind of tersely, and they're really hard to do. That is the important part of the claim of the patent. And just to give you an example of how important they are, when I'm going to finance a patent, I will spend 5 hours writing the claims, writing a little teeny piece in the back. I will spend 5 hours on claims for every 1 hour I spend writing the entire rest of the patent. Okay, those claims are so important. I write the claims, I search them, I rewrite the claims, I try a different tact on the claims, I try approaching it from this angle or that technique or whatever. I spend 5 times as much time on the claims as I do the rest. That's how important the claims are. Anyway, moving forward, is it detectable? A lot of startups patent the wrong things. They start with things that are undetectable to begin with and wind up with patents that don't have any value. For example, software algorithms. AI, machine learning, blockchain, blah, 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 scoring systems, ranking systems, big calculations, anything with a formula in it, absolutely the wrong thing to put in a patent. Software algorithms are completely undetectable. And it really comes down to, can I tell that some computer that a competitor has is running the exact same algorithm as I am? The answer is no, because I'm never going to have access to their source code. I'm never going to be able to dig through their machine forensically and figure out if it's doing the exact same algorithm. And it has to be the exact same algorithm before I could even sue them. Okay? A lot of times people do these multi-actor claims where I have some things are happening by this one device or this one function, this one function happening over here by this person, another function happening over here, and another functioning happening over here. And those things just don't lend themselves to the patent system. A typical multi-actor claim is some things that happens on my cell phone and something happens in the cloud. And those two things have to interact. And typically when that happens, those are not good patents to get, or not good ways to claim those inventions. An artifact of today's technology is that things that run in the cloud can be moved. And especially method claims where a method is infringed when and where, and the where is important, when and where somebody does the method. So let's say we have a computer process. Our competitor has a computer process that's using my patented method, and they're running it in the cloud. Well, if I sue them, what can they do? With today's technology, they package it up in a virtual machine, one click of the button. They move it from Amazon Web Services or Azure or Rackspace or wherever they're running here in the US, and they move it to Canada or Mexico or Vietnam or Zimbabwe or anywhere I don't have a patent. And so just from an enforceability standpoint, anything that was in the cloud, no point in getting a patent on it. It's impossible to do. So why give out our trade secrets? Because we're not going to give anything in return. So don't do the patent. Methods of manufacturing. I talked to a company not too long ago, had this great way of manufacturing, build construction beams and that kind of stuff that would replace wood. And it's actually cheaper than wood. And they had a manufacturing process that they put in a patent, and they had all their speeds and feeds and all their pressures and temperatures and hold times and dwell times and resins that they used and the raw materials and the pre-process. They put it all in a patent. And then they're worried why the Chinese are making the exact same product and shipping it into the US. Well, that inventor only got a patent on the process. They did not get a patent on the product. And so they essentially took their competitive advantage and published it for the world to see, and messed up, whatever competitive advantage they had. It was eroded. If something happens behind closed doors, if it happens inside the factory, if it happens inside the computer, inside the black box, keep it as a trade secret. Never, never, never get a patent on it. Think about getting patents only on what you can see. For software patents, and we'll look at one of the most valuable software patents out there, It's on a user interface. It's something that's easy to see. It's easy to detect. And it might not be purely the consumer interface. It might be an administrative interface. It might be an API or whatever. For people who manufacture products or manufacture machines that make products, only get patents on what goes out your door. If you're selling machines to other manufacturers, get patents on the machine. Yes, you run the risk that your customer might buy a machine and might duplicate it himself, but fine. If they do, you're going to be cheaper than them because you've already done a lot of the engineering. So that's kind of, marks how much value you're adding. But getting a patent on what leaves your door, if you're getting a patent on the machine, you're able to stop competitors, who are people who make machines, from competing with you. However, if you sell the finished good that comes out off the machine, don't ever tell anybody about it. Put that machine behind closed doors, make people sign NDAs to go in and see it, never talk about it, and it's just the thing that produces this magic material that you get a patent on. You want to get a patent on that product, but not the process. For my example of the building material guy, I wish that we had a patent on just the product, just his I-beam or whatever the beam was, and this much resin and this much strength and so on. We could have defined it in a way that really could have kept his competitors at bay. Let's look at the other part of this. Can somebody design around your patent? One way to think about this is, what if my competitor had this patent? If my competitor had this patent, what would I do to still address my customer need, still build my product? How would I have to change my product if my competitor had this? And that's kind of an interesting thought process of stress testing that invention, stress testing the value of that invention. If I have a $3 improvement to a $10 product, if that's what my patent is, that $3 improvement, and my competitor had that patent, well, how would I have to respond? He's selling the product for $7. I have to sell it for $10. What would I do in response? How would I fix that? What would I do? And that thought process might jog a lot of interesting ideas to improve either your product or improve the patent that you're thinking about getting. Or it may prove that getting the patent's not even worth it. And there may be another way to get around the invention. It may be a better improvement, or it may not be worth getting a patent at all. One thing that I think is a huge myth is that people think patents mean a monopoly. And I'll tell you that this myth it's sad that it got into the nomenclature and people talk about it. Even the Supreme Court and lawyers talk about patents as monopoly. They're not, okay? They're, just because I have a patent on this thing does not mean I get to build the machine, build this thing, build or import or sell this machine or this thing. All it means is I get to tax somebody who steps in my sandbox. A patent is a negative right. It doesn't mean I get to do something. It means I get to stop somebody else from doing it. And one of the reasons I think, and kind of going back to the angel investors, who put money into a company, angel investors might have heard this myth that patents are a monopoly, and, oh, you have a patent on it, you must therefore have a monopoly, I'll invest. Well, that's a that's a complete misunderstanding of what patents are and how they work. Patents are this negative right that I just mentioned. And if you think about a sandbox, and that's the limits of the claims are the sandbox. If somebody wants to play in the sandbox, I get to say cease and desist, or I get to put a tax on them, charge them a license fee. The alternative is that they can go around. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about designing around a patent. A patent's a roadblock, and if I own that roadblock, I can, control the inflow and outflow across that road. But if there's another road around it, why would anybody pay me? My patent really doesn't have any value. Good patents come when you've seen a problem that nobody has seen before, not when you have a new solution. If you have a solution to yet another solution to an existing problem, the patent really doesn't have any value. But when you're plowing new ground, when you're in a space where nobody else has ever been before, then you can lay down a patent that everybody is going to have to pay. Everybody's going to have to, go through that on their way to this new place that you've established. And on the screen here is a picture of Apple's most valuable patent, which is slide to unlock. And think about the world before iPhone. Before iPhone, every single cell phone, from the old bag phones and brick phones and flip phones, every single phone had a green button and a red button. Green button answered a call, red button ended a call. Every single cell phone had a green button and a red button. Apple said, we're going in a new direction where we don't have buttons, but we have this touch screen. All of a sudden, they're in a space that nobody has ever thought about. Nobody has ever said, what if we don't have any buttons? And what's the first problem that a competitor is going to have to solve? A competitor that wants to do a touchscreen phone is, well, they could put the green button, red button, or the green button, red button is kind of clunky. Or what's the problem that they're going to have to solve? They're going to have to solve the problem of answering the phone. How do I answer a phone call? And because Apple was first to see that problem space, they were able to design the most elegant and simple and intuitive solution to that. The cool thing about that is they can control the entire smartphone marketplace with this one thing. How do I answer a call? And if you want to get around the patent, go put the green button and red button on your phone. You're welcome to do that. But it's so compelling and it's so good that Samsung felt the need, Google felt the need to implement something like that. So when I'm working with a company or giving them advice or whatever, where are the good patents? Are the good patents in the gold mine? The good patents are over here. The good patents are in the picks and shovels. The things that make it work are where the real value is. And if you think about it, even from the standpoint of running your business, as a startup company kind of goes through that thrashing, minimum viable product, figure out what the customer wants, pitch it to them, get some response, change, back and forth. It's when they really figure out how to say that value proposition, how to deliver a product that meets that value proposition, that's the thing that really makes a valuable patent. I think about the kind of the visionary patents of startups is kind of like this castle in the picture. It's sitting out on an island, and it's grand and wonderful and lit up at night and it's beautiful and so on. I don't want to finance that patent. And I don't want to finance that patent because there's no data to support it. I'll talk about that in a minute, but what I want to finance is this little part over on the side, the bridge that gets to the vision, the bridge that gets to the castle. I want to finance that, the enabling technologies that make this thing work. And if you go back to the iPhone example, yeah, Apple probably did patents on, big old device with a touch screen, answers phones and does all this stuff. And they did do patents on that. But the patent that really mattered was the way to get to that. Not so much the vision, but the important bridge they had to cross to get there. What I want out of this talk is really a story of hope and encouragement. It is okay to cut patents out of the out of your patent portfolio. Get rid of stuff that's not earning money for you or not giving you a competitive advantage. Use these two tools that we talked about, detectability and design around, as a way to screen whether or not this patent is going to be worth putting more money into it. If it's not, then just walk away from it and take that cash and use it somewhere else. The patents that we did early on really don't have, they didn't have any data to support them. After doing, a lot of companies will do that initial big grand patent, and then they'll go out and try to start working on the technology. Then they'll start trying to figure out if there's product market fit. Then they'll start figuring out if there's a real, if there's a value proposition that they can deliver. I don't want to do those first patents. I don't think there are any value in financing them, and I let those guys go. The best patents are yet to come. The best patents are the patents that you do now are way better informed. You know more about the technology. You know more about the marketplace. You know what your competitors are doing. You know what is really making money for your customers. So if it were me, I would prune the tree really heavily on your patent portfolio, get rid of a lot of your costs and expenses, maybe do a new patent if you think that's prudent. But use these two tools, the detectability and design around, to figure out if you should keep putting money into a patent. And I'll leave you with this. IBM is the world's largest patentee. They get more patents than any company in the world, and they have for decades. They have the single most sophisticated way of managing their patents. They have the best people. They have the best law firms. They have the best of everything. This is, by definition, absolute world class. And you know what? They spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on every one of those patents, maybe over 2, 3, 5, 6 years to get those patents. They get rid of 40% of their patents in the first 4 years after those patents are granted. Think about that. 40% of their portfolio either gets abandoned or sold in the first 4 years. This is the world leader, and they are pretty aggressive on getting rid of dead wood out of their patent portfolio, and you should too. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. I am more than happy to chat with any entrepreneur who's thinking about IP and wants to chat about strategy. Happy to talk to any angel investor who's doing a deal, either looking at making an investment or wants some feedback on an investment they already made. Happy to help people with that. My core business is to finance patents, but I do, kind of part of my community outreach is to, I'm happy to spend a half an hour with you and answer any questions or look at some patents and give you some feedback on them. So feel free to reach out to me at blueironip.com/schedule-a-call, schedule a call, or find me on LinkedIn, find me on email, or give the office a call. I'm happy to chat with you. So I've got a couple minutes to answer some questions, and let me see what I have here. I'll stop the screen share and we'll have a look at them. So I have a couple questions about provisional patents. One person writes, I got a provisional patent so I get a filing date, then filed the real patent a year later. Is this a good strategy? Another one just has a general question. What about provisional patents? Are they good for startups? My view is that provisional patents are terrible for startups. And that probably goes against everything you've ever heard about provisionals as being, oh, they're low cost, oh, they're cheap, oh, you can get a filing date and then you're protected. Well, if you remember that example of that Tropicana patent that we looked at, we can see all those pages of description and then the claims. The claims are only valuable if I have support for them, if I've described them in the description. If I'm sending in a thin provisional and then a year later I'm going out and doing a non-provisional, kind of the full patent, well, I really didn't describe all this stuff until a year later. So in reality, I really wasn't protected until a year later. And what happens for a startup is they think, well, I just filed my provisional, I gave it to my patent attorney, gave me this filing receipt, I'm protected. And so they go out and they start talking. And in the US, we get this 1 year grace period from when we disclose something to when we have to file the patent. But Europe doesn't have that. Most other countries don't have that 1 year grace period. So what just happened in my example is you file a provisional and then they go out and start doing demos, talking to investors, talking to customers, and then file the real patent afterwards. They've essentially lost all their international filing rights. What's worse is that the startup's most valuable asset is really not money, but it's time. Money is a proxy for time. The more money we have, the more time we have, but it's really about time. The faster I can get a patent for a startup, the faster they can raise money against it, the faster we can do loans against it, the faster they can enforce it, the faster they can do outbound licensing, the faster they can do a deal with a strategic. The faster they get a patent, the better off they are. But provisionals are the exact opposite. The provisionals are about delaying getting the patent. So those are just a few reasons of why I don't like provisionals, especially for startup companies. I think we have time for another question. So here's one. My startup has several patents filed in other countries. How do I decide which countries are the best? And that's actually easier than you think. I would not necessarily go through and say, well, we're doing business in Japan, and we're doing business in Dubai, and we're doing business in Israel, and we're doing business in Europe, and we're doing business here and there and everywhere, and start filing patents all over the place. Patents are 20-year assets, and your business is going to morph and change over that time dramatically. As much as it would be really great to have patents in every country of the world. It's ridiculously expensive. The patents are most valuable in 3 countries. In the US, because we live here and do business here primarily, in Germany and in China. And the reason for Germany and China are purely that you can enforce patents in Germany and China. And you can enforce them better than you can enforce them in the US. Now, 10 years ago, China was notorious for having a terrible patent system and so on. Not the case anymore. In China, you can get injunctions that are not available here in the US. An injunction means I go to court and I say, this person is infringing my patent. Here's my claims. You infringe, claim, infringe, claim, infringe, claim, infringe. Clearly you infringe, and you can go to court and they issue an injunction today and stop the presses right away, stop the manufacturing, stop the sale. And all of a sudden the other company has to defend that. That's no longer, that's been eroded very significantly here in the US. So we don't have nearly the patent rights that we actually have in China, for example. So when I'm talking to a patent broker and they're looking at buying or selling patent assets, or they're trying to sell them to somebody, for example, they want to see patents in the US, Germany, and China. The rest of the world, not nearly as important. So hopefully that was a little bit of, gave you a little more context on foreign filing. Well, thank you for visiting with me during this webinar. I appreciate your questions and your participation, and feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat with anybody about this or any other issue that you have. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.